Are we good, Patricia?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Susan Gillis, and I'm the curator of the Boca Raton Historical Society Museum. Welcome to our virtual lecture series, Boca History 101. We have muted your mics, and we ask you please don't unmute and don't join with video because we are recording this session, and we're going to provide a recording to all our attendees. Today, we're going to be talking about the Florida land boom of the 1920s, Boca Raton, and Addison Mizner, part 2. Well, first of all, let's backtrack just a minute. In 1924, before Mizner gets involved with Boca Raton, the town of Boca Raton, R-A-T-O-N-E, actually decides to incorporate. And for reasons not clear to me, in 1925, the town reincorporates as the town of Boca Raton, R-A-T-O-N. And 1925 is the date when the state legislature recognizes Boca's incorporation. So 1925 is the date that our modern city government likes to recognize as the date of incorporation. So the town actually hires Addison Mizner as city planner. Why not? That's what he's doing anyway. Now, city planning wasn't like really a new profession, but was kind of a trendy profession in the 1920s. So it was really prestigious for a little place like Boca Raton to have a planner, particularly with the acclaim of Mr. Mizner. So one of the first things the city asks, or the town asks Mizner to do, is to plan a new city hall for Boca Raton. And interestingly, all of his plans and the advertisements always allude to City Hall, not Town Hall. I think this is optimistically looking to the future when Boca Raton will be a city. We didn't know it would take so long back then. Mizner designs this handsome two-story version of City Hall, but spoiler alert, the taxes are not coming in quite as rapidly as hoped, and so it proves too expensive. So Mizner downsizes his design to the one-story version you see at the bottom of the screen. Well, this too proves too expensive in early 26. So even though construction is begun on version 2, construction is halted for a number of months. And finally, the town hires Delray architect William Alsmeyer to complete the Spanish mission-style building we have today, and that is a variety of Mediterranean revival. And you will notice that the completed town hall has the same footprint as Mizner's version. And I can tell you from reading the Alsmeyer plans that indeed the foundations were laid and some of the walls were actually constructed for the Mizner version of our city hall. This is the building under construction in February of 1927. This is the north and west facade, sort of the back of the building today. We know that a number of features, such as the Pecky cypress ceiling, floor tiles, ironwork for balconies and grills and so on, were actually ordered from Mizner Industries and indeed incorporated into the Alsmeyer design. I mean, we have these receipts which are actually from the old city records. The building was finally ready for occupancy by April of 1927. This is an interesting photo when it's nearing completion. And here's another view of the north and west facade after completion, and little Boca Raton Road, which is just to the north of Town Hall today, seems to be under development. Now, Mizner had a number of competitors, not just throughout the state, but right in Boca Raton. And many of our subdivisions that still exist were actually established in the 1920s, Port Lamar, Kings Court, Boca Raton Heights. Some, however, never sort of made it off paper. And I want to talk about a couple of those. It's really interesting. So one of my favorites is Boca Raton Park. Now, we know about this through photos and advertisements, but also a couple of our long ago pioneers who are no longer with us had recollections about Boca Raton Park, and they were under the impression it was a Mizner project, but it most definitely was not. But we'll see why they were confused about that. First of all, the ads say that Boca Raton Park is going to be in the heart of Boca Raton. But we know from the photo at upper left, that's a road building team building roads at Boca Raton Park at the northwest corner of what is today Military Trail and Glades Road, which were not really through. Military wasn't through back then. Glades was a farm road. And whereas now we might consider that to be the heart of Boca Raton, in 1926, it most definitely was not. That was way the heck out west and way the heck up north. And indeed, when you read the advertisements from these various competitors, they say things like this: all improvements will be installed according to Mizner specifications. So they're happy to imply that Mizner's directly involved with their projects, even if they were not, even if he were not. So one of the most successful projects, competition projects, was Billerica. And Billerica still is a subdivision today. It's sort of either side of Spanish River Boulevard between Dixie and Federal. But back in the mid-20s, it went all the way to the beach. And it was a project of Mr. George Harvey. This is the office headquarters on Dixie Highway. Remember, Federal didn't exist yet. Harvey engages the services of Delray architect Sam Ogren, and he designs a beautiful railroad station, a post office, and an inn, the Billerica Inn. And I infer from this that this was going to be a separate town, really. These were never built. However, the streets were laid out, as you can see, and some residences, also designed by Ogren, were actually constructed. They're kind of handsome. Now, I have a newspaper article from the 30s that talks about moving houses from Boca, Greater Boca Raton, to Delray. And I believe it's possible that one or two of these houses were salvaged and moved in the Depression, basically to Delray Beach. But there's no paper trail because this territory, I believe, was outside of city limits at the time. So you wouldn't have needed a permit from the Boca Inn, is the point of that. But one day we may figure out what happened to these nice looking buildings. Now, this photo is often identified as a Meyer Development dredge, but it clearly says Billerica right on it. So this is a dredge cleaning out the intercoastal and Lake Wyman area so everybody could get their yachts in close to the Billerica development. Billerica had its own beach, and there was actually a bridge over the intercoastal at about Northeast 32nd Street. So south of Spanish River Boulevard, it would have been a little swing bridge, not used and therefore relocated at some time, maybe even the 1930s. So long gone. Here's some of the independent projects that were constructed in the era. The beautiful Morada Bonita, which today is the home of Royal Palm Realties on East Palmetto Park Road, east of the bridge over the intercoastal. The Kramer House, which is on East Boca Raton Road, east of Sanborn Park, sort of the opposite side of the street of the new Tower 155 development. You may know it as the Azalina House. And Blue Patio was another Gates property, very beautiful. All the darker color there was a blue ceramic tile. It was very handsome. And it stood on Federal, adjacent what is today Royal Palm Place. And it was demolished in about 1960. So this wonderful ad appeared in the newspapers in 1925, looking ahead to the future. And it's truly wonderful in its promotion of Boca Raton. I am the rendezvous of the rich. Each passing day sees a new era in my existence. I am the dream of a genius, the materialization of a magical mirage. I am the sun porch of America. I am Boca Raton in 1927. Who could ask for better town promotion? However, unfortunately, the answer is not, because the boom, she has gone bust. And there's a number of factors, and we are going to cycle back to Mizner, I assure you. First of all, 1925, remember Mizner announces the project in April of 25. Well, by August, the Florida East Coast Railway at the time was still the only through rail to Miami in Southeast Florida. That other rail line, the Seaboard Airline, today it's part of Amtrak, was under construction but not completed yet. And so the FEC was a major route for building supplies. We had Dixie Highway, but the roads weren't all that great. You could bring things by ship, but not very efficiently. So the train was really your major source of transport for building supplies. In August, the Florida East Coast Railway decides to place an embargo on building supplies. Why? Because there are box cars laden with building supplies clogging up every depot on the entire east coast of Florida. Why? Because there's not enough available labor to offload the box cars. Why? Because the available labor is out making really good money doing construction. And we couldn't bring in new labor because there are no building supplies to build affordable housing for additional labor. So it's a vicious cycle. You can't build without building supplies. Wall Street and the New York Times and so on, as we will see, really hate seeing all this money flow into Southeast Florida, into Florida. And they start a smear campaign, a lot of it aimed at Boca Raton. The IRS starts questioning the binder boys. They say, hey, wait a minute, you have to pay taxes on the full amount of these properties you're buying. That's kind of doesn't work for them. And most of all, wealthy winter visitors come in January, February, March, and it is delightful and wonderful. But normal people come in July and August in their cars to these very, very seasonal communities. And they get down here and there's no place to stay, and there's no place to eat, and there's no air conditioning, and there's no pest control, and it's miserable. And they climb in their cars and go back north and say, you have got to be crazy to buy land in Florida. And if that's not enough, we had not one, but two killer hurricanes hit our area. The 26th storm, which is called the storm that ended the boom, hit Miami and Fort Lauderdale, Dade, and Broward County, September 17th and 18th of 1926. That was their Hurricane Katrina in terms of financial damage. I read that virtually every property in the two counties had sustained some damage. There was loss of life and so on. Boca got hit. We had train cars turn over. That's pretty powerful winds. And if that is not enough, almost 2 years to the day in September 28th, a storm hits West Palm Beach, Cat 4, goes inland, pushes all the water out of Lake Okeechobee, drowns over 3,000 people. Horrible, horrible storm. So the image you see here is actually after the 28th storm, and I believe that's the little Singing Pines, the Children's Museum, still standing after the 28th storm, which is a real testament to its construction. The short-term effects are obvious. It was terrible. But the long-term effects were even greater, because anybody who could get out of South Florida did. Anybody who was planning to come did not. The Great Depression comes to Southeast Florida years ahead of the rest of the nation. Let's look at the population change. In 1920, roughly 100 people. At its peak, maybe 3,500. Now, I don't have an official record on this. These are estimates. Harley Gates said as many as 3,500 people in town. Where did we put all of them? Well, I can tell you from this little newspaper article, it actually says we have 3,500 workers working on the Mizner project. And I know the workers were housed in temporary, like labor camps, not as negative as that sounds. They had clinics and recreation facilities and so on. There were also tourist camps in the area, and a tourist camp is like an RV park. But nonetheless, a lot of people crowded into town. Meanwhile, by 1930, we're back down to 320 population. So let's talk about Mizner again. So remember, April 25, we announced getting going. By October of that same year, Coleman DuPont and other board members object to some of the effusive Meyer Development advertisements because they are afraid that they imply that these backers will personally guarantee the construction projects. And in fact, they send a letter stating their reasons for resigning from the Meyer Development Board to the New York Times, which in turn publishes the letter in the paper. And it includes a comment that the board members' objections to the possible exaggerated publicity claims are met with disdain by the company officers. They're not going to do anything to change their publicity. Well, this, according to Dr. Curl, just seals the fate of the Meyer Development Corporation. And this is as early as November of 25. So in June of 26, jump to the next year, one of the stockholders files petition in federal court that Meyer Development be placed in receivership. And he too claims that these advertisements are exaggerated, that we can't fulfill the promises made, and that advertisements are worded to mislead the public. Now, I've read a lot of these ads. We have about 90 to 100 of them, full-size newspaper ads from Meyer Development, and we have copies in our collection. Here's one from January of 26. And most of these advertisements say what will be. Okay, this is what we're planning. And it's very hard to prove that you're not going to do something in the future. But it's a very different matter to say what you claim to have done already. So this is about our progress as of January 26th. Pavement along Camino Real now being laid, yes. The cloister in 87% completed, happened, yes. 3 golf courses under construction, yes. Bulkheading and dredging of lakes and canals, yes. Foundation of the Ritz-Carlton now being placed, that's the beachfront hotel. I don't know. Streets and drives being leveled and graded, yes. 200 houses now building. Well, I know 50 or 60 were. And it's possible there were others that were laid out, planned, whatever. Were they under construction? I'm not sure. So you can see ambivalence in these ads. Nonetheless, I wanted to throw this in here to show where some of that Meyer Development Corporation money went. This is Lake Boca Raton in 1926. The arrow points to the Cloister Inn under construction. And Meyer Development has to pay for dredges. What they're doing is removing bulkheads and the sandbar and so on out of Lake Boca Raton. And that line right here, this is the Florida East Coast Canal, now the Intercoastal, which was dredged right through the center of Lake Boca Raton because most of the lake was probably not real navigable. So these dredges are at work building seawalls over here in the Port Lamar neighborhood, but removing these bulkheads so the lake is navigable. That's where some of the money is going. So back to our lawsuit, the judge dismisses the suit, but Mizner's backer say, wait a minute, they force a reorganization. So in July of 26, Meyer Development Management is turned over to the Chicago-based Central Equities Corporation. Mizner is no longer really in charge, but he's retained as president, at least for part of that time, and as architectural advisor. Of course, they need his name. That's what's keeping things going. Well, that's July. September 26th, the 26th storm hits, and construction slows to a crawl. It didn't completely stop, but it really hurts. Now, we know as of early 27, the Cloister Inn, which was a seasonal hotel, does open for season 2. Open a few months in 26. It's open in, say, January, February, March of 27. Mizner was at the opening. And the Ritz-Carlton Golf Course is completed and played upon by early 27. However, by July of 27, Meyer Development Corporation is well and truly bankrupt. It's the end for them. But wait, there's more. So let's talk a little bit about after the bust. First of all, Federal Highway is under construction. Now, Federal Highway through downtown Boca Raton had already been completed. It was called the King's Highway. It was part of Meisner's grandiose plans for Boca Raton, and it was asphalted. It had street lights and so on. But you can see it right. The highway's under construction sort of north and south of town. And I know my grandfather worked on the construction of Federal in Broward County in the 30s. So it took a long time to complete. That second train, the Seaboard Airline, finally comes to town in 1927. The first through train is on January 8th of 27, the famous Orange Blossom Special. And the train had on board our governor, Governor Martin, and the president of the railway, S. Davies Warfield. They stopped at every town. So the Boca Ratonians don't have a station because Meisner didn't build his. But they arrive at the rail line on their horses and in their vehicles, as you can see in this wonderful picture, with placards spelling out the name Boca Raton and a sign that says, "Shall ever ambitious Boca Raton own a real depot?" So, of course, the train stops and Warfield gives a very gracious talk in which he promises that indeed Boca Raton will have a seaboard rail station. But he lies. We never get one. That's why we don't have a decent Amtrak station. But we did get a Florida East Coast Railway passenger station. North of Camino Real on Dixie Highway, where it stands today, a beautiful little Mediterranean revival style building by Chester Henninger Architect. Completed in 1930, Meisner's out of the picture. He had nothing to do with this. So by November of 1927, Clarencegeist, who is one of the original investors in Meyer Development, purchases the assets of Meyer Development for $71,500 and assumes the debts, which are quite large. Now, this included miles of oceanfront, and nobody wanted it. What were they going to do with it? Now, Geist was a Philadelphia utilities guy, very successful. He was also an avid golfer. He lived in Palm Beach part-time. He had a summertime golf resort at the Seaview in New Jersey, which is still a very fine golf resort. And he needs a wintertime golf resort. So for him, the Cloister Inn is the principal asset of Meyer Development Corporation. Geist hires famous hotel architects Schultz and Weaver, who designed the Breakers in Palm Beach, the Biltmore in Coral Gables, and the Waldorf Astoria in New York, to more than triple the size of the Cloister Inn. And it opens as the Boca Raton Club in January of 1930 and becomes one of the major economic engines of the community. Let's look a minute at the club. This is a diagram that shows the historic portions of the hotel. So the top of the picture is east and to the right is south. As you come in, if you're driving into the main courtyard right here, okay, and here's the fountain with the statue of the slave girl, and that's what the statue is called. The part of the hotel to your right, the southeast corner, that is the Cloister Inn, minus the ugly 1960s tower. So that's the part that Meisner did. Now, interestingly, over here, you can see my cursor, over here in the upper left, back up, was a wing of the Cloister Inn. It was a service wing. So this is, instead of just demolishing it and building the new hotel, some of those walls were actually incorporated into the Boca Raton Club. And the reason I know this is because we have very detailed plans of the Cloister Inn. We have very detailed plans of the Boca Raton Club. So it appears to be kind of a rabbit warren in the upper left of this picture. Some of those walls are actually probably left over from the Cloister Inn. Interesting. So here we go. The lobby, which you may recognize left, today it's unfortunately painted white, but was designed by Schultz and Weaver. Mizner had nothing to do with this lobby. His lobby is much smaller, it still exists. And the beautiful cathedral dining room, also Schultz and Weaver, doesn't have anything to do with Mizner. These are from the Boca Raton Club era. So January of 30. At upper left, I have a lakefront view of the Cloister Inn. Lower left is a lakefront view of the Boca Raton Club, which you can see was quite a bit larger. And to your right, the part of the pictures of the modern hotel incorporated within the red rectangle and trapezoid represent the historic, the Cloister Inn and the Boca Raton Club. Boca Raton Club really includes the Cloister Inn. So this is a comment from our friend, Dr. Curl, our Mizner expert. The vastness of the Boca Raton enterprise doomed it to failure from the beginning. Remember, it included airplane landing area and so on. It was very ambitious. As Mizner purchased land for the development, the boom was approaching its peak. His timing was terrible. We have hindsight, but April 25 to announce by August, things really started downhill. The Cloister Inn administration building, Old Florestas Spanish Village, remain a testimony to the dream. Many of his plans were carried out, such as Camino Real, the Broad Boulevard, golf course communities, polo, an airport, yacht basins, and Spanish-style shopping centers were all built. So let's do a little retrospective. So Mizner was around Boca Raton or involved with Boca Raton project for about 2 years. Now I'm going to segue on that in a minute because I know my hotel guides are out there and are my Mizner aficionados. We had a discussion about this in the office the other day. Everybody has heard a different amount of time that Mizner was involved with the Boca Raton project. Dr. Curl actually says in our online exhibit a little over a year that Mizner was involved with Boca. I think he's counting from say April 25 to July 26 when he's kicked out as manager. But from my perspective, he's still involved until 27. So I'm saying 2 years. Okay, now the rest of you just ignore that part. Not a very long time. And yet we love to name things after him. We sort of in a way long for the glamour of that era, of course. He had such an influence on architecture. We absolutely cannot escape Mediterranean revival architecture. We build public buildings like the Spanish River Library in that style. We build commercial buildings with red tile roofs and arches and colonnades and balconies still. We just can't escape our true love for this Mediterranean revival style. City planning and roadways. He planned the city. Nobody else had done that before. A lot of the roads still exist. I showed you that in some of the maps and so on. He really laid out the city, at least the southern part of the city, and set the tone for the future. But most of all, he gave Boca Raton a sense of uniqueness that sets Boca Raton apart from other cities on the Gold Coast, and I would say Florida. Because after all, Boca Raton is the world's new social capital, the answer to the need, where society assembles, successful men back Boca Raton. It's the place to enjoy Florida, and naturally, it's going to add happy years to your life. Here are some books that we do recommend about Mr. Mizner and this wonderful era. The Boca Raton Resort and Club, Mizner's Inn, is a history of the hotel. And there's a whole chapter on Mizner and the Boca Raton Development Project. Mizner, Florida is Dr. Curl's pivotal work published in 1980. That was the first scholarly work really done about Mizner and his architecture, and sort of dealt with a lot of the mythology that has accompanied Mizner. It is out of print, but you can, sometimes we have used copies in our gift shop, and you can get it online pretty easily. It's certainly in the library. Boomtime Boca is a photographic history that I wrote based on the collections from our Boca Historical Society collections, many of the photos you've seen in this presentation. And the coffee table book on Addison Mizner is by Kaufman and Perkins. And they did a lot of research at our digs. I was allowed to review the chapter on Boca Raton. The Historical Society of Palm Beach County was very much part of that. So we have a lot of confidence in its legitimacy and how it handles the subject. These can be had through our Fire Bay gift shop. In addition, please visit our website, bocahistory.org. You pull down the research tab, our history. There's a page on Mizner with the links to other documents, for example, on Floresta, Spanish Village, the Cloister Inn, the Administration Building, the Boca Raton Record. There's also an online exhibit called Mizner's Dream. And of course, our new History Alive exhibits will feature a gallery dedicated to Mizner Industries, Mizner's architecture, and the Boca Raton project. So this concludes part 2 of Mizner and Boca Raton. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we will be taking up the interesting subject of World War II in Boca Raton. Thanks for joining us.